Hi everyone, I hope you're well. Welcome back to the channel and to another edition of the weekly Tottenham News Review, where I'll be going through all the main Spurs news, rumours and reports. My name's Lee The Dorset Spur, and if you're watching on YouTube, please like, comment and subscribe to the channel. If you're listening on an audio platform, please hit that follow button and leave a review if you can. So, last 7 days, bit of a positive spin, I think. Andy Robertson joins on a free. So, first signing of the summer before the window has even opened, and we have picked up Andy Robertson on a free transfer from Liverpool. Left back, a position that we've really struggled with Udogie having lots of injuries, Jed Spence being a right back rather than a left back. It's a real issue in terms of that positioning. Andy Robertson is a Premier League proven player. He has won many awards. He's a Scotland international, captain of Scotland. He's playing in the World Cup. He comes for free. So he brings a wealth of experience, a wealth of knowledge, how to win things, and so on. And so for me, it was a no-brainer, absolutely the right thing to do. And there's been a lot of talk about having experience within the club. The balance wasn't quite right. You know, we've brought a lot of youngsters in, a lot of promise and so on. But actually players that have the experience of winning stuff, that are proper leaders and so on, doesn't really seem to be there. That's what the insiders are saying. Roberto De Zerbi should be the man making these decisions. He's involved, and he was quite positive about this transfer, was keen to have him, admired him as a player and so on. So first bit of good news, Andy Robertson joins the club on a free transfer. On top of that, we then get Marcus Senesi joins on a free from Bournemouth. Now, Marcus Senesi, left-footed, centre-back, so bringing, again, Premier League experience and leadership and so on. I think he's something like 28 years of age, with Robertson being 32, so a little bit younger, but still within his prime. And of course, the really good news for him coming after that was that he's just been called up to go to the World Cup with Argentina. So real positive thing for him. Looks like he really wanted to play for Spurs. Like I say, left-footed, can play in a three at the back as well as in a back four or whatever. And again, experience, depth, leadership, all kind of makes sense. It does kind of throw up a little bit of a conversation about what's happening with that back four. Who's going to be in there? Is Romero staying? Is Van der Ven staying? What's happening with Vuskovic? What's happening with Danso? What's happening with Dragushin? What's happening with Romero? So in there's got to be a discussion around Dragushin. We think is, that's a real one that's being talked about a lot. His agent has been pimping him out left, right and centre. So I would expect that he will be one that will be moving on for sure. And then, of course, we have the uncertainty around Romero, who is constantly being linked with Atletico Madrid. So we don't know what's going on there either. And then, of course, we also have Van der Ven, who's been heavily linked with Liverpool and Manchester United. So there may be some outgoings in that, but we definitely need to bring some players in. So Robertson and Senesi makes absolute sense. On top of that, we've also had Ben Davies sign an additional year on his contract as that was coming to an end. That has probably been hit with a little bit of uncertainty and division amongst fans, because obviously Ben Davies is seen as old guard and part of the problem and on all that kind of stuff. I've seen a lot of that being promoted as well. But as I've said in many times, Ben Davies, he's a professional, he is loyal, He's been wanted by every coach who's been at the club. He's a big voice in the dressing room, and we saw that even back in the days of COVID, when there was no fans in the stadium and all you could hear was Ben Davies leading the team. So obviously those voices are very, very important around the club for sure. So not sure what to make of that one. Do you think that's good news? Personally, I do, but I don't know. We'll see. And then, of course, Jed Spence was called up for the World Cup squad, the only Tottenham player to be in the England squad, and also in the pre-warm-up game, he was the man who provided the assist for Harry Kane. So gone over there and doing his thing. Obviously, still wearing the chin strap for his broken jaw or fractured jaw, whatever it was. That didn't even get a yellow card. Anyway, that's an aside. So some positive news in all of that. Then, of course, we have Yves Bissouma having been released by Spurs, which again, I think to a certain extent is good news. Yves Bissouma, obviously a decent footballer, international footballer and all that, and we saw how good he was at Brighton, but never really took off at Spurs. His attitude seemed to be a bit of a problem. He didn't seem to do what he needed to do. We had the issues with balloons. We had the issue with him turning up late constantly and so on. And so a bad egg, it would seem, which is a bit of a shame because, you can see that there is a player in there. But, time to move on. Let's not be nostalgic about every single player that we have. That's not gonna work. Not in this day and age where we really need to be pushing forward. We cannot afford to sit and be 17th every year. That is just not acceptable for a club the size of Tottenham Hotspur. We've also released 11 youth players. So there's been a big cull at the lower levels of players kind of moving on. I can't tell you an awful lot about all of those because I'm not really aware of each of those players. I'm sure Chris will be able to tell you a lot more about those than I will. And then the final story that really caught my eye over the last week is Sebastian Kehl rejecting Tottenham's offer to be a joint sporting director with Johan Langer. It seems that there was some really good positive talks and so on and so forth, but the sticking point seemed to be how much influence Roberto De Zerbi would have in the purchasing of players and so on. For me, I think we've dodged a bullet. I personally don't want a director of football who is going to tell you these are your players, end of. The manager needs to have a say in what's going on there. For me, I think we need to set out a standard of how we are going to play, what type of players we want, what's our philosophy, and we need to set that all the way through from the youth teams all the way through to the first team, so that if your manager leaves, you bring in a manager who plays the same. If your youth manager leaves, you bring in a manager who plays the same. The players then learn all the way through the system so that they progress to the first team. We cannot keep going with this constant change of standards and styles. It's just not working. De Zerbi has signed a 5-year contract. So if he's signed a 5-year contract, then he absolutely needs to see that contract out. That's the plan. That's what you need to do. You need to build an infrastructure that's going to support that. And then at the end of this, if he goes after 5 years, the next manager needs to be someone who can keep that same style, provided it's doing the right thing and winning games and so on and being successful. But you need to set that out and make it successful. If you're going to be a counter-attacking football, you need to set that out to be successful. If you're going to be, a possession-based football team, then you need to make that successful. You can't keep going from one to the other and ending up with the wrong players in the wrong squad, playing the wrong way. You've got to have players that can play the style that you want your team to play in. And that's for sure. I just finish off with the story that's kind of broke today about Luka Vuskovic and interest from Brighton. I think that would be an absolute travesty to lose a talent like that. I think whilst it might not have been successful so far with players coming to Tottenham so young, it doesn't mean that young players cannot develop into great players. You know, your Archie Grays, your Bergvals and so on, your Kinskis. These are young players that need to develop and learn. But what you don't want is to rely on a whole team of those players. You need to give them time to learn and develop and so on. And Vuskovic is absolutely one of those. He is a real bright spark, a player that is playing at international level. And we will see how he gets on against Harry Kane on Wednesday. So we'll know what kind of level he is at. But to lose him at this stage for some ridiculous fee of 30 to 40 million would be an absolute travesty. I know De Zerbi wants Van Hecke, and Brighton may feel they have the whip hand, but in my view, we should not be selling our brightest talents just to get another player. We can't have him as our starting fullback at this moment in time. He's 19 years of age. He may not be Premier League proven, but at the same time, we don't want to be giving him away to a Premier League rival. And I understand that De Zerbi needs to have ready now players because we cannot afford to sit 17th again. But at the same time, that cannot be at the expense of what's going to happen 3, 4, 5 years down the line. So Tottenham need to really stick to their guns on this. If Van Hecke can only come to Spurs, if Vuskovic goes to Brighton, then that should be on loan. And if that's not the case and we can't get Van Hecke without Vuskovic going, then for me, I think we walk away from that deal. We shouldn't be held to ransom by any other club. A big club wouldn't do that. You know, you wouldn't see Man City do that. You wouldn't see Man United or Liverpool or even Arsenal do that. You know, they're not going to give away their star players just to fulfil another transfer. It's just not going to happen. Anyway, that's it from me. I'll keep it fairly short and sweet today. So thanks for watching and listening. I hope you enjoyed it. If you're watching on YouTube, please like, comment and subscribe to the channel. If you are listening on an audio platform, please do hit that follow button and leave a review if you can. I'm Lee The Dorset Spur. I have my own channel, so if you're looking for other stuff to watch on YouTube, please do pop across and say hi. I'd be more than grateful and more than happy to have you come along there. So thanks for watching. As I say, I'll see you on the next one. And as always, up the Spurs.